right, maybe we just get right into the meat of the discussion. Panel, what to you are the most pressing security risks facing digital assets on digital ledgers today? This can, maybe Carlos, you want to start?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for thanks first of all, David and team and all of our team to having me here. I guess if I have to think about the challenges, I would split it in between. I want to say on the public side of the world, the public ledgers, probably risk. How do you manage risk? How do you track risk? How do you understand the risk of the transactions of everything or the assets that are there? Probably would be one of the main challenges there, especially for institutions. And then on the private side of the world, the closed environments, I'll say complexity because of the whole governance, the integrations, and how do you make sure that you're managing the assets? Because right now everyone is kind of actually we were discussing it a little earlier, everyone's kind of doing their own thing. Everyone's kind of building their own solution, right? But there's going to be a world where we're going to have to integrate each other and not necessarily representing the assets in the exact same way. So when you want to have interoperability, when you want to have other things there, that's going to be a big challenge to us. How do we align? How do we get to those standards that would make this new financial infrastructure work as efficient as possible and as painless as possible?
I'll give you a quick background before I dive into this. So I'm the managing partner of Istari Ventures. We're an early-stage crypto fund purely focusing on payments. But I started my crypto career as a product manager at Coinbase Custody back in 2018. After that, I led the operations at another custodian called PolySign. So my perspective is purely coming from custody, how to custody your private keys. I think one of the challenges we have seen in the past was really trying to find trusted parties. They can be individuals or third parties to hold your private keys, right, for your organizations. So I don't know if people know, a lot of times the cybersecurity like a cyber hack or key custodians are typically within the organizations, like internal parties just going bad, or when you sign a quorum, how many people can unlock the keys are having some kind of conflicts. For example, right, if you set a quorum of 2 out of 3 people to sign a key, possibly these 2 people are having some kind of, plans, right, can want to take the money away because it's a better financial outcome. So one of the things is really how you can design internally, how many people to get on your quorum to unlock the private keys, and potentially finding third parties like a law firm, like an accounting firm, to have a separate backup key to prevent these kind of events happening. There's a lot more, other like edge cases, but that's what we've seen most commonly are happening.
I'm head of security for BNY, previously was at BlockFi, also was at KPMG Crypto. Views today are my own, so I just have to throw that out there. I think for DLT, smart contracts, Web3 stuff, doing that in a world-class institutional way from a security perspective has a number of challenges. I agree with both Carlos and Tracy. I think from an integration perspective, it's really difficult to work, amongst different teams in a siloed space. And then, I've built custody a number of different times, so definitely key management is an issue, and finding trust. I think at the end of the day, when you are building custody, you have to you end up having to trust somebody, whether it ends up being that company CISO or a small group of people within the company. And then that, from a security perspective, now you have an insider risk, and then you have insider risk across a number of other areas as well. I think both on the decentralized side, and maybe I say that more, it's like Web3, but for smart contract design and implementation, I think we're seeing a lot of the same issues that we saw in the very early days. We still are seeing a lot of reentrancy attacks. I think your actual business logic implementation, your permissioning, managing your blockchain infrastructure from a security perspective is also challenging when you get into your key management, DNS, CAs. I think security's hard. It's not easy to do for stuff that we know really well. And it's definitely not easy to do for emerging technologies, especially ones too, the narrative around them of like, oh, blockchain is so secure. Nothing is secure. Things are only going to be as secure as you make them and how you design them and how you implement them.
So now that we have some sense of all the risks here, insider threats, key management, what have you, what exactly are we proposing that institutions start doing about all of this? This is for any one of you, maybe Carlos.
I picked the wrong seat. Well, I'll start by saying, just in case, my name is Carlos. I'm part of DTCC product development on the IT side, software engineer background. And before DTCC, I was part of Consensus, which is a software product, a blockchain software product company, probably mostly known by MetaMask or Infura or similar, just as a background. So, I mean, I won't even make an attempt to try to talk about what I think the DeFi space could try to do. Clearly, it's very vast, very big, so I'll try a little bit to frame it a little bit more on the institutional side, which is where I'm closest to. So first, as just echoing what Katelyn was saying, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel in many cases. There are a lot of good practices or good of things security practices that need to be accounted for. Clearly, it's a little bit of a different technical approach to it, given how the technology operates if implemented in a distributed way. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things. Actually, a lot of the hacks or the challenges that we've seen, once you read the forensics of it, you just realize that somebody just pushed code without testing it first, or something, there was a common attack or something. So there's a lot that we could just reuse. So I don't think just that would be like the baseline of things. But in general, I guess for me, the most important piece of things is how do we handle the complexity once we have this? Because we're not driving to a world where there's just going to be one blockchain, where there's just going to be one type of represent assets, where there's just going to be one thing to handle. There's going to be a lot of governance models, and of course, there's going to be regulation. So how do we all kind of as an industry align and agree to make sure that we have the common ways, the minimal things to make sure that, you know, if you need to freeze an asset, that it would actually happen, and there's no digital twin of it in some other chain that's still moving around. So those kind of things will be relevant, and for me, I guess the approach is as an industry to have a forum to discuss, to talk about these things, and to figure out how do we align on them, because it's uncharted territory, it's completely new. So definitely as an industry, I think the most important thing is to drive to standards in governance, in assets, how do we represent them, how do we manage them, and most importantly, to understand how roles of the financial institutional players are changing and how they should look like and more in a tokenized digital asset world where it's not going to be exactly the same. You're still going to have issuers agents, you're still going to have investors agents, you're still going to have regulators, you're still going to have risk. All of those are going to be there, but they're going to be a little bit different. And because the world's just going to move faster, you're not going to have 3 days to react. So it's important to I guess, as an industry, to drive alignment and to figure out how, as an industry, we want to collaborate in this space and to make it become mainstream so we could all benefit of the 70% gain in efficiencies that was quoted before the start of the event.
Yeah, I think I'll come from a little bit more specific ways of dealing with some security challenges in crypto, right? I think I have a lot of conversations with my past CISO from Coinbase custody before. You know, we always been telling even like our clients back then is try to not put all your tokens into one custody. Basically, you want to diversify. You want to find alternative custody providers, and you want to separate the risks within different custodian providers. And some of them are having a cold storage technology. Some of them are using MPCs. So there are all pros and cons. But in general, if you diversify the risk, in case of a key lost, right, you're only jeopardizing a small portion of your total assets holding. So that's on one thing. I think the other security is we've been kind of seeing a lot of protocols getting hacked recently, especially during the DeFi last several months. Basically, after all FTX event happens, a lot of DeFi protocols got hacked. I think like an ongoing security testing and checkpoints is very important. especially after you go through a mainnet, right? A lot of hackers are really trying to, especially for bridges or cross-chain, to get access to the smart contract and, steal the tokens. So ongoing, testing and security check is extremely important, I think, for any, either you build your internal blockchain or just public chains out there. I think these are the two main things I think everybody should be very, very aware of in terms of just security in general.
Definitely agree with both of you. I think there's a couple things top of mind for me. I think we need better DevSecOps across pipelines for development for Web3, blockchain, smart contract projects. I'm very big on product application security and embedded cyber protection. I have literally sat with product teams and written them user stories of how to better secure something as they are designing it or as part of their release. I know CISA is driving that secure by design across tech companies and others as well, but that absolutely has to be at the forefront for crypto companies too. I'm also, this is probably a strong opinion, but I'm still wondering why crypto has not adopted more aerospace engineering principles. Sure, we're not dealing with thousands of people flying every day, but you are dealing with people's livelihood. And I think from a security perspective, sometimes there can be certain risks that would put people at risk. So I think just driving, build fast, break things, I think is over. I think we need to slow down. I think we need to build better products. I think we need to build more secure products. And I think overall principles need to be better. It's kind of unacceptable to just have private keys laying around or for that to be something that can be compromised, at least at this point. So that's kind of where I sit on that side of things.
Institutional DLT is still relatively new. I think that's why we're all here today. Most of the digital ledgers people know of, the household names, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and such, are maintained by worldwide decentralized communities. So how are we proposing that organizations benefit from the security upside of this tech within what would presumably be centralized, permissioned environments? And Carlos, I won't pick on you this time.
Yeah, I think there's lots of benefits. I think decentralization and centralization to me is always kind of a curve, and with money and technology and everything else, I think we go back and forth between being super decentralized to kind of coming more towards centralization to then going back towards decentralization. I don't view it as good or bad. I think using blockchain for open source development or open projects or decentralized projects, great. If you want to be able to bring that in-house to whatever you're doing to drive a certain use case, I think that's great too. And the implementation is going to look different depending on what you're building and what you're doing and what you're trying to get to. I know a lot of people try to drive a narrative of permissioned or private is bad, and there is no real good or bad. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do and what you want to build and what you're trying to get at.
My perspective is, I mostly work on now looking for early stage startups to invest. So what we have been seeing out there is really a lot of talented developers are building different layer ones and layer twos. I think, everybody have the idea that everything needs to be fully distributed. Everyone around the world can have access, right, to these blockchains. But I think from the institutional perspective, I see a lot of in the future that some blockchains is probably better to be internalized, means more centralized solutions, right? Especially if you do lending protocols. I think, in the past, I've run into a situation that we as a company was trying to lend our money to other DeFi lenders. We couldn't really verify who are the ones are borrowing from the other side, right? Our internal compliance team was having a huge issue. Our client side's internal team have an issue. So these are really the challenges we're facing to move, especially institutional DeFi into more, institutions or people's hands. So I think some centralized distributed ledger or blockchain is really serve the purposes that we can do KYC, right? We can do AML check on them. And I think it's actually potentially to have a better way to bring institution money or Web2 into crypto. But I think there's also a few challenges where I'm seeing out there is, I think hiring crypto professionals to work in institutions, I don't know if you guys are seeing that, to me is a huge challenge, right? Most of my friends from Silicon Valley really don't want to work for a bank, right? So there's gotta be some kind of incentives you should bring these talented developers into your organizations. I also previously worked with 2 different CISOs before for crypto. They've been approached numerous times by other crypto companies with the same role, right? So which the talent pool is extremely small, but these are the people has the most knowledgeable kind of perspective and things on crypto, right? For security, for anything cryptographer related, you actually want these kind of experts to be on your team. So I will say is for institutions, players, right, find a way to attract these talents is also another very key components to, I think, to push our private blockchain more, adopted.
I always have to feel like I need to make sure when I say decentralization, what I mean by it, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, right? I honestly, and this again is a very personal opinion, so a complete disclaimer, not related to my company on this. The decentralization, I think, is misinterpreted. Actually, I personally still struggle because I don't really know if people value it. Binance chain is very centralized, but it has a lot of activity there. So I still have that challenge on the decentralization. So I don't know how much of a decentralized governance will actually, be a source of benefit yet. I think it's still there. I do understand the benefit of I own my own keys, I control my own assets. I don't challenge that. But a lot of the networks that people are operating, a lot of the protocols, I don't think people really understand how they work. Like, oh no, Binance, but Binance is controlled by very limited number of actual nodes or entities, which is even smaller than other industries. So I still challenge a lot when people refer to decentralization. I think there's a lot of value in the distribution or the distributed network side of the technology, right? And I'll start by saying this is for priors and see the value. It's like comparing the value of the traditional email, postal mail service versus the email, right? Clearly, as soon as you digitalize, there's a lot of efficiency gains. Just again, this is out before when I was working in Consensus in the Philippines, just establishing a network for rural banks to have tokenized fiat for national payments, just dropped the time from 15 days to 15 minutes. And the cost from the service just went to 1/3 of what it was, right? And this was just Union Bank, which is a bank there that definitely just enabled that. And they were just the central point of holding the money. And they just tokenized that money into different accounts on a private network, right? So there's a lot of the benefit of the distribution there. So I definitely think that the main benefit of this technology for institutions or for at least in the financial industry is how do we get to a more efficient way to reconcile and to manage state of assets? Right now, clearly, this is not the exact picture of everything, but right now what it works, there's a buyer, there's a seller, there's a third party in between. All of them have a different state. All of them have a different view. All of them think that they have the truth or they have the golden source of truth. So they all need to reconcile. If we move to a world where actually we have a single source of truth and what we have on top of it is a programmatic rules that we could all align and agree to move, exchange, trade, or swap assets, that's just going to drive the efficiencies that were quoted in there at the beginning. So for me, that's the value, what I think it's worth pursuing for almost any industry, not only the financial service industry, but that's the one closest to me. But definitely for me, that's the value here is how do we all get to a single source of truth and a solid governance model that we could all agree on. So reconciliation and a lot of the steps towards that could change and actually efficiencies in the system could be attained.
So I cover traditional cybersecurity basically every day, and I can tell you that most of the most financially ruinous of those cyber attacks that have occurred in recent years have occurred in the Web3 space. So what would you all tell finance executives who are looking at this and thinking, are the rewards worth the risk that they might perceive in that?
Here, right, I think I'll give you like an example, basically the maybe AWS story, right? They're a cloud storage provider. They're basically number one right now. But I think back then, many, many years ago, I worked in tech company in my entire career. And back then, people are very, very reluctant moving into a cloud storage solution, right? Because your data is somewhere, can be hacked. It was very challenging to move large companies into that kind of cloud computing space. But now, fast forward 10 plus years later, right? There's no company I know is not really using AWS or any cloud solution provider. So back to the cyber attack, right? I think just because we are prone to be attacked in the Web2 world, also in Web3, it doesn't really prevent us to moving forward into that direction, right? It's similar like we have bank robbers, right? Just because of that, we're not running banks. That's not that possible. But what I can say is it's really, I think sometimes Web3 security cyber attack is quite similar to Web2 world. Is, as I said earlier, you got to run security checks. You got to hire the right people, right? Before you launch anything to a mainnet, you got to do a lot of testing on the test net. We have actually seen startups, like new startups, are developing automation testing tools after you launch a product on the mainnet, right? So I think one of the challenges we have in Web3 right now is all the toolings, all the middleware, or foundational pieces are not available yet, right? They're still being developed. So they're not really quite equipped to testing, all the security kind of like holes in their code at the moment. So I think in the next several years, you're gonna see more and more, testing tools coming out to help engineers to prevent cybersecurity attack on the protocol level, right? So I think we'll see that change happening. But also on the other side of the security, I still personally believe like the private key management is the most important things if you actually hold any significant amount of assets under custody, right? So hire the right team members. If you don't have the CISO with a crypto experience, maybe hire like a consultant, right? Talk to somebody with the experience. A couple of tips, I think it will really help the organization to kind of have a really structured way of managing their private keys.
With any new technology, Tracy mentioned cloud, AI, ML, all the reasons, good actors want to use it and all the benefits you get from it. There's a way to exploit it, and bad actors are going to want to use it too. That should not stop you from, moving forward with whatever your business strategy is. And if that's to make money, you're probably going to end up wanting to do something in DeFi or Web3. I've seen it the reverse, where you kind of have the business who's a little bit more aggressive, and your cyber team, especially me, is the one saying like, wait, what's happening here? Let's slow down. Or there are a number of things we need to do before we can actually launch something like this. But I've seen more of, the business is there to make money, and security cannot be a blocker or something that stops the business from going. That's not why you're there. You're there to enable the business. So I think my biggest thing is always figuring out how can we do this in the safest, best way possible to ensure that, the company is still going to succeed and everyone can do what it is that they need to do. Yeah, that's my perspective on that.
It's been very flashy and a lot on the news and everything, but I mean, I think it just depends on where you come from, you're going to find, because for me personally, I think the biggest ever attack to come is to come, which is a lot of countries are just storing our traffic, encrypted traffic. As soon as they have quantum, they're just going to break everything that is being passed through the internet today and see what they get there. So it really depends on where you see in the future, where you think how big it's the attack going to be, right? Before people had to walk into a bank before to steal it. Now we make it easy, it's available, it's digital, right? So definitely there's been there. I just think it's been, as I was mentioning sort of before, that sometimes not the good practices are being followed to achieve basic security baselines that are known and not new. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So in general, I would think the whole space, because in the institutional space we have to follow. It's not like I could choose it. But most of the attacks have been on, in the DeFi space. It's a matter of following, I think, a little bit of the good practices, taking all those things into account. But most importantly, I also think that there has to be a mindset in the space to protect the end user. A lot of people don't really understand how things even work. They just are afraid of missing out on the next coin that 10x itself or something. They're just looking for there, and people are, that the CEO of an exchange had to go out in the craziness of a few years back saying, people don't put mortgages on your house and put that money in crypto. For me, that's very much telling, the amount of craziness that it's going on. So I think as in this space, we need to figure out a way how to protect the user, how to give validity to the project, so people at least know that they could be there. I don't know, I cannot even begin to explain what a metamorphism attack is, but the tell that a smart contract is immutable is not true. So there's things that are there that people would just never understand, or will be very hard to understand. They don't care to understand. Right, so I think as an industry, the most important thing to avoid these attacks is to get baseline security, as well as to, make sure that we're protecting the end user. So this is where I think, a regulatory framework that enables the potentials and the properties of technology, such as blockchain technology or AI or any other technology out there, are very useful, because they do have the end user in mind and their security. So I know it's sometimes a pain to go through it, but there are reasons why those controls exist, to avoid some scenarios where, like I've said, some people losing their houses because they put it into something that they thought it was going to 10x, and they were going to be the next millionaire out there, and they just lose their house. Right? Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and I'll pass it on to the next speakers.
Thank you, everyone.